Hello and welcome to our Midweek podcast. My name is Jerry Hendricks. We're podcasting for First Baptist Church in Sweetwater, Texas. This is our midweek conversation where we hope to bridge the conversation from Sunday to Sunday. We're glad that you've joined us. Today I have my good friend, and you're familiar with him, Teek Hamilton. Teek, welcome to the table.
Thanks, Jerry. I like being at the table.
All right. Well, some have reminded us that there are many kinds of tables in their home, and we should not neglect the coffee table.
Yes. I think we had a call from Kramer this week to tell us not to neglect the coffee table.
Well,
there's the Seinfeld reference for y'all.
So this is, I guess, any table that has coffee on it can be a coffee table. And I'm sure we'll get clarification from one of our listeners in regard to that.
We have only one table in our house.
Really?
Yep.
Wait. You don't have a lamp table?
No. We don't even have, what do they call them, end tables? We don't have anything by our couches. The center of our couch folds down and has like cup holders.
Okay, I have an idea. Let's podcast from your house next week.
Okay.
From the one table that you have in your house.
That's all we have. In my opinion, if you have more tables, that's more things to have to clean around or to clean. So we are very minimalistic at our house in the form of furniture. We had the same couch that I had in college until about 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, I'm really wanting to clarify more here.
Okay.
But probably I feel like we ought to move on.
We're very minimalistic.
Yes, you are.
We don't need a bunch of couches because it's just the two of us.
So this table that you have, do you eat at the table?
Mm-hmm. We do it a lot more recently because we're actually eating at home. But yeah, we eat table. Like I said, it's kind of, there's Stacy's spot. And it's funny, we never assign spots, but Stacy ends up in one spot, I end up in the other. And even when her sister came to visit, she sat in her spot.
Yeah, when there's just two of you, it's not hard to
have your
assign. You don't really need to assign spots.
Right. But we have spots that we sit. And I think it's because you never want your back to the door. And so both of us don't have our back to the door.
Again, I would say there's a lot of questions I have about this conversation, Teek, but probably feel like that we should do this off camera.
I think Thomas Vincent would be on my side about you don't put your back to the door.
I'm not talking about that.
It's a natural thing.
I'm not talking about that at all. Anyway, so speaking of Thomas, you guys got together. One of the things that we're encouraging people to do is to download or look at our interactive Bible study. It's something new that we're providing. It works real well with this series, and we're hoping that we can continue to do this throughout our conversations on Sunday. But very simply, it's really a Bible study that you can do on your own, or you could do it with a friend, or with some friends, or your spouse or family, however you want to do it. We're trying to do it where it would work for just an individual, or something that would also work for children if you wanted to go over this with your children. So that's just some thoughts that we've tossed out there, and hope that you'd take advantage of that. Give us some feedback on that in person, or you can use this, I guess, or the Facebook to communicate with us. But we're enjoying getting to create it and use it as a part of our ongoing system in our conversation.
Right, and you can find that Bible study on our weekly newsletter. It's on the front page of our website, www.fbcsweetwater.org, and it's on all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So it's everywhere you can find it.
So in that first section, I tried to mention this Sunday, and I completely blew it, but it's engage, right?
I don't remember.
I can't remember. Again, I blew it. The first step, though, are really just some questions that kind of help you start thinking about the context of what the Scripture is going to be talking about.
It's like a jump starter.
Right. And so if you're in a group or you're with another individual, it helps you to connect. I believe it's connect. It connects you to the other people in the group, and it helps everyone have the opportunity to respond in sort of a non-threatening way. And then the second step is the engage step. But you can take that first step and use that really just to kind of kickstart your thought process about the Scripture and about what was going on in the narrative that we get to read in the Bible.
It was interesting as we're sitting around talking about the table experience, we talked about our tables growing up. And at my house, Pop had built like a booth type area, and then he built a table that went in there, and then we had a bench that went on the other side. And so we grew up having a table that Pop had built specifically to fit our family. Well, Thomas has a large family, and I think Megan had a large family too, so I think Thomas had a large booth bench style one also. And so it's cool to talk about that, and then reading a book right now that talked about the table in the New Testament, but also talked about a family that had, I think, like 17 members, and so they had actually built a table big enough for 17 plus one. There was that one extra table, and I was like, wow.
That's crazy. Well, you all got together and at the park, I think, and talked about and went through the process that we're introducing to people.
Right. We did the Bible study together, had the conversation. We picked up our own food. Naturally, I got Whataburger, and they picked up Arby's, and we went over and talked and hung out. Thomas was still, he was on his lunch break from, he works for the highway department, or for DPS, and so he was on his lunch break and came and hung out with us and got to see the circus going on across the way. So it was fun.
Well, that's great. Yeah. So it is interesting in thinking about the second version that we did Sunday. I got to thinking about, I don't think we talked about this last week, all of the table rules that different places have. My cousins, and this struck me, I don't know if everybody spends some summertime with their cousins, but we did growing up, and you had to ask permission to leave the table. And I go, I don't know that anyone in current culture does that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. We
may I be
excused.
May be excused.
Yeah.
And then if they could, or if they had eaten enough or whatever, then their parents would say, yes, you may.
Yeah, but usually the response was, one more big bite of green beans. But yeah, I think we always had to say, may I be excused? And it is something that I don't know if it's going out of style or what, but just thinking about my most recent times of eating with family and kids and stuff like that, I want to get down or something like that. But I remember the language of it was like you had to say, may I be excused?
Right.
And if you said, can I be excused? It was, I don't know, can you? I mean, that's...
There you go. Well, I know when you merge habits from families, you have to sort of either acquiesce to one or the other, or you usually just come up kind of with your own system.
Right.
And we had determined early on that we would eat at the table. We don't do that anymore, now that it's just Sharon and I again. But we did then, and wanted to establish a good practice of that. We don't turn the television on during that time. But one of the things about Sharon's family is they would sit at the table forever. And at my house, we didn't ask to be excused. We just finished, and when we were finished, we could do whatever. And my dad would sit at the table forever. He was a nibbler. I mean, he would never, there were seldom leftovers because he'd just kind of sit there and just continue to nibble at what was left on the table. But generally, I was the first one to leave the table. And so we laugh at when I'm with Sharon's family, early in our marriage, we'd have gatherings, and most everyone around the table knew that I'm just antsy out of my mind. And
so they're slowing down.
Well, it's the
eating.
most uncomfortable chair in the house, generally speaking.
Yep.
And anyways, so all that to say, I have terrible table manners, I suppose, but that's just kind of how it's fleshed out for us with our family.
That's kind of how ours was. And TV wasn't on, but it was quickly on when the first one left, and if the Rangers were playing, it was on the Rangers game. Yeah. And so then I was happy at the table because I could hear the game going on.
Yeah, so. It's crazy thinking about all this. And then here it was a couple of weeks ago, I promised that for the second time in the 5.5 years we've lived in Sweetwater, Sharon and I were going to eat at the table for our anniversary, and I forgot about it.
And y'all did?
No, I didn't think about it till like the next day when we were podcasting. Anyways.
And you know what doesn't matter anymore? If you're a family of two, it doesn't matter which direction you pass the food around the table.
That's true.
But I remember going to like Mima's house and having Thanksgiving, and we would have something going one way, and I think it was usually probably my brother or my cousin who would intentionally pass something the wrong way. So you've got some food making this one and one thing going this way.
There's always that.
They always
person.
knew who it was too, and so.
Oh man!
But you don't have to worry about that with two people.
No,
it's all right there.
Well, it's been fun to look at different passages in the Bible where Jesus was at the table eating with people. Mm-hmm. One that Heather called my attention to. I thought in the sequence, I had it in my head that we were doing the feeding of the 5,000, and we're not doing that text.
Okay.
But that is another example of what of Jesus meeting with people and food being present around his teaching, around something that was going to stand out as significant that the people would want to understand.
Yeah. Loaves and fishes.
Yeah. So it's anyway. This week is going to be interesting. It's the text about the great banquet, about those that are invited to the banquet, and so there's probably, in terms of us really understanding our role of bringing people to the table, I think there's more there for us to grasp and then to make current day practical application for what developing and building those relationships are like.
Yeah, that's going to be good, because especially in a time of pandemic, us kind of being socially distanced, how does that apply to us now, and how do we continue to live out the great banquet and the invitation? Right.
It is. It's going to be interesting. I hope that you'll either join us Sunday or tune in through the podcast on Sunday, or live stream worship at 10:30. However it is that you best connect with us for worship during these days, we look forward to being able to talk about that. As far as thinking forward past this, the following week we talk about the time of communion and what that looks like, and that is going to be one of those very practical steps for us where we provide a recipe, the recipe we use actually at our church for making your own communion bread. It's something that's real simple, but we're hoping that people will kind of lock in on that and do that either for themselves or as a family, and then partake in communion on that Sunday regardless of where they are. Haven't decided yet exactly how we're going to facilitate it here at the church, but that's going to be, as always, a meaningful time.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I love when we do communion because we do it in a special way. And the idea, and even the idea of making the bread, I remember it was at Crosspoint where Toby, I think, would make the bread every once in a while, and just the smell that the fresh bread makes in the room.
Right.
And so I love when people make the bread. I love it more when someone's willing to make it and bring it up fresh, so that just that smell. Because there's something to be said about how smell, sounds influence your spiritual formation also.
Right.
And when you smell that bread, it's good.
Well, and it'll be a good time for us as we kind of work through this series, and then see what happens after we wrap up at the end of August. But for sure, it's been, I think, I was thinking about this, if we were to sit down with a group of people from our church and ask them series themes that have stood out to them, I would really be surprised if in the future that they wouldn't look back on this one being one of the most memorable ones.
I think so, because I think some people remember, I imagine most remember the one we did right after Thanksgiving, where we had a table set up on stage, and the impact that had of hearing people's stories.
Yeah, and that's what ultimately led to this series, was that experience we had on that Thanksgiving day.
That was cool, because there were 3 different people who spoke, and so you heard them tell the story, and so I enjoyed that. That idea of table rules that you mentioned like 5 minutes ago, I think that'd be interesting to hear everybody else's table rules. What are the table rules in your house? Go ahead and post that in the comments, because I want to hear what your table rules are and see if I need to steal any of them.
There you go. That's a good idea.
I like
and
that.
Obviously, as we've shared, some of us, like this guy, need some coaching on good table rules or table manners. So we'll accept any and all comments regard to that. But thanks for joining us this week. It's been fun talking about this and continuing to think through our life in terms of the table. I'd encourage you even to, however you use Scripture, to look up the different references in Scripture where the table is mentioned. Yeah. And it is numerous throughout Scripture, Old and New Testament, and in not always the same context either. Right. And that's important too, to really just to see how important table is and then we've got that reminder in our home every day, or some of us have that reminder in our home every day.
We have a table, just not a coffee table.
There you go.
We only need one table to remind us.
Well, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being a part of your life for worship this Sunday.
See you Sunday.